This is the Anthrobiology Podcast, hosted by me, Gabby LaPera. Every 2 weeks, I interview a biological anthropologist about what makes us, us. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Anthrobiology Podcast. Joining me here today, I have Dr. Jesse Goliath of Mississippi State University. Hello, how are you?
Hi, Gabby. Thanks for having me.
I am so excited to have you here. Listeners, what you don't know is that we just spent 12 minutes shooting the shit. So we're already having a good time, and I welcome you to join our conversation and also have a good time with us while talking about things that are kind of sad.
Sad but important.
Sad but important. That's very true. Yes. Like a lot of things in academia, sad but important, and very interesting, which is the most important part. You are doing a lot of different things. Your main field of study is forensics. So I think the way that I would like to tackle this interview is to ask you how you ended up in anthropology, because I would also like to talk to you about pioneers of color. And I think that there are probably some parallels that we can pull out there. So how did you... And don't worry, listeners, we're going to talk about pioneers of color. We're going to get there. But first, tell me, how did you end up in anthropology? Why forensics? Like, what happened to make you Dr. Goliath today?
So I tell students, really, I kind of had this wandering path. It was, you see me now as Dr. Jesse Goliath, but it was kind of a lot of soul searching and trying to find a fit for something. And so my actual first anthropology class was in high school. I took an elective class where it was half the semester was criminology and the other half was anthropology. And I really liked the idea of kind of combining history and science and how we can mesh those two fields together to make something that was cool and interesting. I loved going to museums as a little kid, and kind of that was our family vacations. My parents always were like, well, let's go to something educational as part of vacation. So we would go to Colonial Williamsburg or any of these kind of historical sites and museums. And so anthropology has kind of always been in my life, but finally choosing that field was really when I was an undergrad at Notre Dame, that there's a major, I could do this and still maybe interested in pre-med and science in general. And so I took pre-med courses and anthropology classes at the same time. And with many of the listeners, I started leaning more and more toward the anthropology and less toward the pre-med biological sciences. And over time, I just found more and more fascinating topics to talk about with DNA and evolution and how people look different. Because I've always been kind of in a place where I was seen as the other. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, but then my family moved to Charleston, West Virginia in the mid-90s. And so being in a major metropolitan area to a very rural, small town was hard for our family to adjust to. People didn't really know who I was. My family spoke Spanish, but we have Afro descent. And so they're like, well, are you African American? Are you Mexican? And it's like, no, my family's from Cuba and Dominican Republic. And so when you say that, they're like Fidel Castro, Desi Arnaz, like they are people who are from that island. Yes.
Correct.
That is correct. But there's other people who look slightly different than those two people you think of. And kind of wanting to know more about why people look different. And anthropology kept giving me more and more clues about that difference, that variation, that how we're all one species, but we look so different from each other.
Yeah. It's interesting. I hadn't realized that your family was from the Dominican Republic. I have a friend from DR, and she's also struggled very much with that. And she grew up in Newark, New Jersey. And she was like, people here still do not understand the concept of like being Latino and not being like looking like what people imagine a Mexican person looks like. It's like, and I am also Latina, and I am white as the driven snow. It's like people don't seem to understand that it's like this kind of super category. And yeah, growing up in Virginia in the 90s, I'm sure Charleston was a whole nother ball of wax, but growing up in Virginia in the 90s, Latina, there was not a lot of, shall we say, representation. There was a lot of confusion about what I was.
Yes. Same for me, where it's like, well, are you biracial? I was like, kind of genetically.
Sure.
So,
yeah, I'm sure more Latin than anything else. And I mean, I also, well, I don't know if you also got this, but I got like a lot of like, I so distinctly remember a kid saying, but if you're Latina, why don't you speak Mexican? And just like the deep confusion in his voice. And I was like, I speak Spanish. And he was like, but that's not what they speak in Mexico. And I was like, it is. I assure you it is. But I'm also
Yeah.
not that kind of Latina.
Yeah. Or it's like, oh, do your family have tacos and burritos at home? It's like, no, we go
No,
to Taco Bell too.
no. I
We
think,
don't make that stuff.
yeah, Venezuelan, like anything other than, well, I think people are starting to know about pupusas. People are like
Yeah.
into pupusas now. But like there's like a whole world of Latino cuisine that is mysterious to people. Like one thing that I did not realize, my mom listens to every single show. I didn't realize that Venezuelans are just nuts about raisins in a way that other people are not.
Yes, Dominicans and Cubans are not about raisins, but somehow they keep end up in dishes. I don't know. Picadillo with raisins
Yeah.
and all these other. I'm like, why are they here? Just take them out.
I I grew up with my mom putting raisins in meatloaf, and I thought that was totally normal. And then I remember the first time I had like and the other thing she would do is she would carve out like a little tunnel in the middle of the meatloaf and fill it with cheese. And so the meatloaf I had was, I don't know, it was not really meatloaf. It was, it's like meatloaf adjacent, but it was like the kind of stuff that I thought that I was eating normal American food, and then I had like an actual meatloaf, and I was like, oh, this bears no resemblance to what.
Yeah, that's like that is not what I had in mind when I was thinking of, or lunches I would take to school. I'd have a little lunchbox with like rice and beans and something, and my friend's like, "Oh, I have peanut butter and jelly sandwich." I'm like, "Okay, that's cool." He's like, "Why do you have rice in your lunch?" I'm like, "This is leftovers from last night. I don't, I don't question my mom puts in there. I just eat it."
There's rice at every meal. That's why.
Yeah.
To this day, there's the only peanut butter in my parents' house is for the dog to hide her pills in. Like they don't eat peanut butter. I love peanut butter for the record, but but yeah, no, it's interesting. Like the things that my mom was like, okay, we're gonna do these things American, and these things not for us.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. It's just like, oh, that's not something we eat or do. It's like, okay. It, it's kind of, and going back to kind of the anthropology, it's
Yes,
like
sorry,
I
yes.
didn't question it. No, it was just like segueing back. Yeah, it's kind of why is our family like that and different from these other families? Why do we eat these foods? And then people are like, that's gross or nasty. I'm like, I grew up eating this or plantains and trying to explain to someone every time I go to the grocery store and I have a check out plantains, the cashier's like, what do you do with that? How do you cook that? What's
Yeah,
and I'm like, it's just like a potato. You can fry it, you can mash it, and they're like, but it looks like a banana. I'm
it
like,
looks like
yeah,
a
it's
really
just
mean banana.
yeah, it's just
Like,
this really
yeah,
starchy banana.
they're so good though.
Like,
Yes. So, okay. So that is what triggered your interest in it, and you entered the field. And why? How did you end up in forensics?
so kind of after I graduated with the my undergraduate at Notre Dame, I was trying to look for opportunities. I still liked the STEM world. I still wanted to do science and DNA. And so in between my undergraduate and graduate work, I started working for the West Virginia State Police in the forensic laboratory because I knew I liked forensics. I grew up watching, Batman and reading these detective comics and kind of a mix of, oh, if I could find these hidden treasures in museums and maybe link it to cases and kind of solving that stuff. It's just maybe in my mind I want to be Batman in an academic setting. How do I use my brain to help solve crime in some capacity?
That's great. I feel like that. I feel like the stereotypical answer is like, oh, I loved Indiana Jones, but I would love the idea of Batman in academia. That's perfect.
Yeah, it's like let me use these gadgets, let me use my intellect to solve these and try to crime fight in a more systematic way and maybe not beating up people so much.
So okay, so you did it and you made it, and
Yeah.
you're a professor, and you're doing great. Like
Yeah.
if you were to Google your name and put it into Google Scholar, or to go to your website, which is very complete, or go to ResearchGate, you're doing a ton of stuff, and you're like publishing, and you're like moving, and you're learning so many things and putting so many interesting ideas out there. So like it's very cool. But I did want to ask you, one of the things that you are working on, one of your projects, is something called Pioneers of Color. Can you explain a little bit about what that is?
Sure. So, kind of going through the academic process, you go and get your undergraduate, you go get your master's, you get your PhD. I kept seeing that there was not a lot of people in the room who looked like me, who were teaching students, who were asking questions that I want to know more about. Like, why do people have different skin color? Why do people have different hair texture? Why are we're focusing on some of these things in a way like, oh, we can look at forensics and population affinity, but what about those evolutionary changes? How'd they come to be? Why did they exist? And so I wanted to look and see if there's maybe past scholars of color who are interested in those same questions. And I couldn't find anything. I was searching, like, there has to be uh, African American, Asian American, Hispanic American scholars who are doing this work in the US history in our field. It's a four field approach. We've got cultural anthropologists, linguistic anthropologists, biological and archaeological anthropologists doing this work, but I wasn't finding people of color, or they weren't emphasized. They maybe had a blip or a footnote here, and I was just kind of wanting to see others like me. So it's kind of that finding that association familiarity within my field. So I wasn't the oddball, that there was others in the field who had the same questions, had the same thoughts, and kind of questioning the field that is this the norm? Is this why we all study this? Is because everyone's accepted it? Or have there other people who have questioned these ideas of why we look at biological variation and categorize it as different ancestral markers or ancestral traits? Or are we looking at, we're studying DNA, but are we looking at specifically haplotypes? Or are we actually looking at those more nuances between groups and populations? Because kind of in Notre Dame, it was really emphasizing that biocultural approach, that we are biological species who are adapting with culture. And then as you move into the more the forensic world, it kind of almost I would say scrapes or skims off some of that cultural aspect, that you have to be neutral, you have to be objective, and kind of looking at those more cultural questions will make you more biased in your analysis and your research. And so I knew that there were other scholars of color who were probably having the same issues or conflicts, and it was just more of a passion project. Who are these people? Why are we not talking about them? And I stumbled upon Dr. Cobb, Dr. Montague Cobb, this really fascinating individual. He was a medical doctor, had a PhD in biological anthropology, was a part of boycotting his organization when they were in these segregated cities and kind of race-based policies. He was sat on at the White House when they were signing the Medicaid Medicare Act. This is a very prominent individual who's an anthropologist who I didn't hear much about in all the years I trained at these many institutions. And so kind of why was he not mentioned? Why was he not discussed in my general studies of the field
Yeah,
versus a Hertlichka, for example, who we kept hearing about all the time?
which is interesting because they were. So the reason I know about Montague Cobb, Dr. Montague Cobb, is because I interned at the
Yeah.
Smithsonian. And he had like a lot of stuff happening with the Smithsonian. Same with Hertlichka, but like people will talk about Hertlichka, but like they won't talk about Cobb, even though like they were around
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
stuff.
And very prominent. The president of the AABAs, or back then the AAPA, he was in charge of the American Anatomical Association. So a very prominent scholar, both in the academic and in the public service, public health world, that I just never heard about until I just started looking more and more about who he was as a person, his other students who told me more about him. It's just, that's kind of why I wanted to start this Pioneers of Color, just almost like a website, or even just kind of when I incorporate those into my lectures now. These are people of color who are doing some of these things. These are not new ideas, which I think we've started to see now in anthropology is like, oh, this is a novel concept, a new idea of looking at this biocultural approach. It's not new. It's been around for a long
Yeah.
time. Uh,
It's definitely interesting. There's like a few different threads to pull on there. Like one is that I think that biological anthropology as a field has been wrestling more and more with its role in colonialism and imperialism and in like race-based science that caused a lot of that formed like the scientific basis quote unquote scientific basis for discrimination for a long time. And it's something that people in the field, people of color in the field, had been talking about for a long time. And it's something that we're kind of becoming more and more increasingly aware of. And I think that really highlights why it's so important to have a diversity of thought in the field, because people do bring up these things a lot earlier. People think differently, so they have different thoughts and they can come up with new things, which is very exciting for all of us. But I think the other thing that I wanted to pull out was that there is still, one of the things that you note in your research is that there's still a huge gap in terms of who is represented in biological anthropology, and especially in forensic anthropology, in terms of race.
Yeah, and that's something that I think bringing these scholars of color into academia, into these intro lecture classes, would show students, hey, there are people who look like me, who think of like me in the past, who've also been in these fields. I think with forensics specifically, we're just, because of the close association with law enforcement and those systemic issues that people of color have had with law enforcement, that they were serving as the arm of systematic racism. They are serving as the weaponizing form of systemic suppression of people of color. And so when you have that as, oh, you work with law enforcement, you help side by side working with them on cases, that is uncomfortable to people of color. Like, wait, do I have to work with the police? I've had family and friends who were victims of police violence, police abuse. Personally, in my life, I have actually been stopped by the police on multiple occasions for no reason. It was I was didn't look like the person that should be in that neighborhood at that time. And so even I have worked with many law enforcement officers. I think they're great. They're, as a whole, there are bad apples in every occupation. So it's not that, oh, police in general, it's, you'll find doctors, lawyers, many other professionals that have those bad apples. But I've been personally stopped by police for committing no crimes. And so I can see that when students who are interested in a field like forensics, like, I don't know. I don't know if that's something I want to be a part of. Is that, or is it going to be welcoming? And so when,
Is
yeah,
it going to be welcoming, and will I be perpetuating these systems of power that hurt people like me?
exactly. Am I going to be the one who's on the forensic side helping these people put away people of color for long periods of time? We know that in general, people of color have longer sentences in jail, have longer convictions. And so, me being a part of that system, am I going to perpetuate that for people who look like me or maybe my own family members? And so that's where I think we're trying to, as myself and other younger scholars of color, saying that we need to dismantle, we need to make people aware of those barriers, those structural things that keep people out of this field. Monetary structural barriers, like, oh, well, and if you want to do anthropology, you have to do a field school, you have to get these internships, you have to get experience. Experience costs money. Students of color,
Yeah.
especially those who are first generation, don't have, flush with cash per se. And so,
Yes. Yeah. No, totally. I feel I was very fortunate in that I had parents that would let me live at home when I interned. And I also found an internship that paid me money. That's not all internships, although they are
yeah,
getting better in general.
they are getting better. But that, like I said,
But it's
that's,
because people are
yeah,
advocating for it. It's like saying we
yeah,
can't, like if we rely solely on people who can afford to not be paid to do this, we're going to get all the same kind of people.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly the case. That there are things already that, not necessarily consciously, but subconscious barriers that are keeping people who don't look like the typical anthropologist out of the field. The way we talk about specific methodologies, that we still mention that there are three racial categories when we look at forensic population affinity, that you've got white, black, and Asian or Asian Native American. And forensic anthropologists know that is not the case, but a lot of our introduction books still have that kind of tri-racial system in place and categorization. We still see emphasis of kind of this biological race approach, that we can statistically predict someone's ancestry or population affinity based on certain features. Now, without understanding the mathematics behind that, that it is a probability, a likelihood. But people are saying, hey, this person is, this skull is 85.5% black based on a data set that we have, or four disk, for example. And so students not knowing the nuances of that, it's like, no, this is a statistical probability of likelihood. The layperson is going to be like, oh, this person's a black skull, or this is a African skull based on this statistical model.
Other forensic anthropologists who've been on the show have mentioned the difficulty, like, of conveying that nuance to people in law enforcement and being like,
Yeah.
this isn't where I'm not just telling, there's like an 85% chance and with like this amount of standard deviation, but it's like people don't hear that. They only hear black and that's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Which is tough.
And it's tough. You want to give them a complete biological profile. And so for those who aren't familiar, biological profile is looking at the features of the skeleton for sex indication, age indicators, trauma, any kind of maybe height or stature, and then also this population affinity or ancestry estimation. And so when we're looking at those categories, we want to give a complete picture because we want to help identify this person. We have this individual who's unknown that we're trying to give a name to or to help law enforcement. But law enforcement also have their own ideas. They have a bunch of missing persons. And if we can give them a race, a sex, a height, and any kind of demographics, they can then take that list and cut things down from that list to give them a possible person. And so they have a slightly different goal than we do. We're trying to identify this person. They're trying to find from all these people who is this individual or this skeleton belong to.
Yeah. Yeah. So yes. So in terms of barriers to entry, there's not seeing people who already look like you there.
Yeah.
There's the concern about the structural component, like what you are contributing to if you go into law enforcement or a law enforcement adjacent field like forensic anthropology. There's the monetary barriers. Are there other things that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I think with forensics, it's also because of this sense of, I guess, neutral or objectivity, it kind of puts people off when they're trying to advocate for those who are marginalized. So when we think about who we see, sadly, who pass often, it's those who are the margins of society, those who may have substance abuse or suffer from substance abuse, those who are trafficked, those who are a part of the LGBTQ plus orientation, those who are kind of seen as the outsiders. And so when we start to mention that these are the people we find as forensic anthropologists, as last responders, as those who are finding the dead, it's really hard for us to just say, okay, we have a report, we wrote it and gave it to the police. We're constantly seeing these people of color, those who are trans individuals left dead with no family knowing who they are, the homeless who are found dead that we're trying to identify. And so for me, it's that public health issue that kind of wears on you, that you're constantly seeing death, and those who are considered outsiders or marginalized who never really get a chance at another second chance of life, that they're found in death.
Yeah. That has to be super wearing to see like the same kinds of people over and over again suffer from the same kinds of violence and it feel like nothing is changing to
Yeah.
make that happen less. Do you want to talk a little bit about like a biocultural approach to forensic cases and like why, I guess maybe start with explaining when you say structural vulnerability, what does that mean?
Yeah. So, kind of going back from what I was talking about, marginalized groups, there's a reason they're marginalized. There are factors that make up who they are, either race, sex, creed, religion, that make them more vulnerable to harassment, to abuse, to pressures from society as a whole. When you are someone who is not like the majority, either by race, by creed, by color, by gender, or identity, you already are, society as a whole sees that as an issue, a hindrance. And society, even though people think, oh, it's this amorphous thing, how people treat you, how you are talked to, how you interact with is different because you're this marginalized status. Because the way you are, society as a whole is trying to say, well, you're not like us. You're like not the norm. And so all that pressure kind of leads those to be more vulnerable within that society. So more likely to die from easily communicable diseases, more likely to suffer from cardiovascular, and other illnesses, more likely to suffer stress or low income, less likely to get hired for jobs in other positions. And so you're seeing that throughout their life that their opportunities are lessened because of these status or this identity that they have ascribed to
Yeah. Yeah. Or that is ascribed to
or
them.
ascribed to them. Exactly.
Yeah. And so, how do you keep that in mind when you're going into a forensic case? Like, for example, you have this really good and extensive article that I encourage people to read, called "The Missing and the Marginalized: A Biocultural Approach to Forensic Anthropology at the U.S.-Mexico Border." That I think maybe you did with a grad student of yours.
Yeah, I did that. Yeah, so that was one of my grad students who is going to be, she's officially defended and is getting her master's this summer, Elise Adams. And so
Congratulations, Elise.
yeah, so Elise came to me with this topic. She had something that she had discussed in her classes and was what we need to have some way of talking about something. It is a political topic. People think of migrants and border crossing and how these are individuals who are coming into our country illegally. But we have to realize that they are people fleeing for a reason. People don't want to leave their homes.
Yeah.
And on the human level, they deserve to be identified. And even though they don't have legal status, even though they're not US citizens, they're found on US soil. And so, as anyone who's doing this kind of work, identification work, we need to be better about identifying those people too, so they can be sent home to their families. Their families don't know that they died on the border. They just maybe think, oh, maybe they got to America and they're doing great and they'll send us money when they get themselves established. But a lot of these people, sadly, because of how the border is, it is a very dangerous place due to not only the environmental conditions, but also the people who are trafficking these individuals. They're related to drug cartels and other criminal activity, and they're not really caring about the people. They care about the drugs and the other things they're trying to smuggle across the border. And so sadly, these people become victims of those drug cartels too. And
Yeah.
so why I mention these things is because from a cultural perspective, it's not just the body. It's not just the biological profile. All those factors are influencing why this person ended up here and may lead us to identify them faster. If we know, okay, they were part of this traffic with this drug cartel is known to be in this area. They have on their personal belongings different religious effigy artifacts, things associated with their cultural peoples, maybe indigenous clothing, textiles, things that from a cultural perspective would help us give a more complex understanding of their identity than just skeletal remains of someone who's crossed over the border.
Yeah. And this is certainly something that we use not just in forensic anthropology. Like, for example, sometimes you will uncover a historic burial and you'll be able to figure out like what time period someone's from by the buttons they had on, because they only make buttons of a certain kind from this period to whatever period. I met a guy who knew a lot about buttons one time, and it was mind blowing.
Yeah, the same
like
thing. Yeah, is when I worked for the Department of Defense for the Defense POW Accounting Agency, there were literally books and books about uniforms and the button types and the styles and how they changed. I didn't know there was so much about buttons, but again, that cultural context is important because that helped us say, hey, this person had to be a Marine from pre-1950s based on what they were wearing.
Yeah, and it's like the smallest. It's like when people think of identifying people, I think that they think about like all of these like biological features. I don't think a lot of people realize how much you can tell by the material remains that are left with them. Like a lot of people hear material. So for listeners, material remains is like any kind of like physical objects that are left behind. And it's something that you normally hear about in terms of archaeology, like people digging up a house in colonial Williamsburg and finding pottery because they always freaking find pottery. Sorry. The voice of someone who has categorized a lot of pot sherds.
Everywhere. There's pottery everywhere.
Why is there so much? But archaeologists, like, bless them, much like the guy with the buttons, they sit down and they make these like incredible, they have like a special name. I can't remember what they're called, but like these basically timelines of all of the things that you can imagine, like pipes. And God, in Virginia, there's so many pipes found and different pipe styles and materials. And they make these like long timelines of all of these different pipes. And you can pretty much pinpoint within like 10 to 15 years when someone died by the pipe they have stuck in their pocket with them. It's crazy. And it's very valuable to know if you're trying to do something like identification.
Yeah, and just kind of it's I know we've been kind of jumping around different topics, but it's really one thread throughout the topic is me trying to find more about others because I was always othered as a young person. What can we do to help identify and bring up the other or advocate for the other because they are already on the margins? They're not the mainstream. They're not seen as, for example, it's a case we see all the time, the missing white women syndrome. So when we look at across social media and on the news, major news, mainstream news, you'll see young white women reported for much longer periods of time, tons of coverage, tons of exposure to the case, who they were as a person, their family, the possible suspects to it. But then you hear the thousands of missing Indigenous women that we don't hear anything about. Those who are victims of human trafficking on the border, those who are victims of substance abuse along the Gulf Coast. It's not just these are people within the United States that it's not popular, it's not trending, it's not something that people are interested in talking about on podcasts like this. But in general, we're seeing that those who are seen as other are othered in other ways as well, in terms of marginalizing their exposure, marginalizing the discussion, not even brought up in conversation, but having a similar life experience or something happening to them similar to a Gabby Petito case.
Right. And it's like the chances of something happening to people who are marginalized is much higher. And then once something happens to them, the chances of us figuring it out or finding them or catching whoever did it is much less.
Yeah.
Anytime someone goes missing, that is very sad and it shouldn't happen. And we should care.
Yeah.
We should care. And it is hard because like so many people go missing. Like there is like a degree of compassion fatigue at a certain point. But at the same time, it's like, why this person and why not that person? You know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Why do we spend the 20-25 minutes talking about this one person when sadly there's probably people in their neighborhood, in their cities, in their towns that have been missing for months on months, maybe even years, that, oh well, that person maybe left with a boyfriend or were involved with nefarious people or in a group of people that are, again, not of the norm, not those who are living a legitimate life, per
yeah.
se.
Yeah. Also, you mentioned, I realize the complete irony of going back to this, but
Yeah.
just because you mentioned Gabby Petito earlier, for listeners, I think, I don't know if everyone remembers this. I was also thinking of the Gabby Petito case when you were talking. This is this girl that like captured the national attention for like 2 weeks or something like that.
Yeah.
It was crazy. It was this girl who was on this road trip with her boyfriend, both white, very much following the beats of domestic abuse and domestic violence that you see that happened to women. She was young and pretty and white, and he murdered her. He murdered her, and there was like interactions with the cops where like people could have intervened, but they didn't, and she died. And that was all anyone could talk about for like 2 weeks. It did fall out of the media cycle. That's more the nature of 2024 rather than like, but or what was that, 2022, 2023,
2023.
2023 maybe. God, it feels like, why is there so much news?
Yeah.
If there could be less. Sorry, that does not relate to anthropology at all. This is me being exhausted. But going back to all of this, so you look at the structural vulnerabilities. You're thinking about like things that make people feel othered or how they are treated as other and like the things that are affecting them. So one of the things that you have chosen to do is a very hands-on thing, is you have created this Mississippi repository for missing and unidentified persons as like a tool to help with this.
Yeah, it's when I get called on cases, as I do as a forensic anthropologist in the state, I would ask law enforcement, hey, who are the other people missing in Mississippi? So I kind of have a general frame of who we're looking for, what we're looking for. And they said, we don't have a listing like that. We don't have a database that tells us who's missing in the state. When I look at NamUs, NamUs doesn't have all the
What's
cases that have been
NamUs?
put in. NamUs is the national system, so it's the National Missing Identified Persons System. So it's a nationwide entry clearinghouse that law enforcement and those who have professional access can input cases of missing and identified remains. So there's a professional access and a public access. And so if you're not in law enforcement or directly associated with law enforcement, you cannot put in cases the same capacity or the same access as those individuals. And so for the general public, they see, okay, there's so many cases in Mississippi, but they don't really get to see the details. It's all public records. So this is stuff that you would see on Facebook or other social media sites. You would see it on the news when people talk about missing persons, but that wasn't available to Mississippians. And so being a rural state, a very poor state, sadly, there is that racial history of segregation in terms of access, economic security, health disparities still present in the state. It's one of the largest populations of Black individuals in the United States, made up in Mississippi. It's the state that has one of the highest percentages of Black individuals, but we're also seeing some of the highest poverty levels of Black individuals in Mississippi. And so, what I wanted to do was one, have something that anyone could use and access who's missing in the state. Two, what data can we get from that? So now that we know people are missing in the state, where in the state are they going missing? Is there a pattern that we can see? Is it in the Delta, which is the western part of the state? It's the poorer part of the state and also the most diverse in terms of population as well. So are we seeing that places where there are predominantly Black individuals who are going missing at a higher rate than other populations in the state? And can we actually tease that out through mapping, geospatial analysis, or even just awareness that, hey, there are people missing in your county or in your city that you may not be aware of because of this missing white woman syndrome, that they're going to focus on only the select few cases and not really mentioning the hundreds of indigenous women, Black women, Hispanic women who are also missing in your state. And so what I did was Louisiana has a state mandated repository that LSU manages. Specifically, Dr. Teresa Wilson manages the LSU repository. And so I asked her, is there any contact you have in Mississippi? She said no. Mississippi was a black hole in terms of missing persons data and information. And so what I did was we took the similar system that Louisiana has. It's called FileMaker, is the program. So we built our database to match theirs so we could share that information between the two states.
Yeah.
And
So you're doing really like a lot here too, right? So like one,
yeah,
you're providing just like a straight up resource that's like, here are all the missing people. Law enforcement can use it just like on a day-to-day basis. But then you're also creating this super powerful like data tool as well
yeah.
that can look at things on a higher level, like a population or like a group level.
And time too, like how over the decades has missing people been recovered? Have they been recovered? Have they been found alive or dead in that recovery period? And has numbers changed, increased, or decreased over time too?
Are there any interesting trends that you'd like to share?
There are some sad trends so one of the biggest trends, yeah, I know.
So,
Remember,
yeah.
sad but important, right?
Yeah, exactly. Please continue with one of the important things that you've noticed.
Yeah, so in the database we currently have 1,422 records, and so that's archived and currently missing persons. Of that 1,400, approximately 60% of those who are found deceased were BIPOC individuals. So if a person of color went missing in Mississippi, about 60% of those who were found deceased in our database. And so they don't make up 60% of the population, but they are ended up being those who are found deceased or not recovered in a timely fashion.
Mm-hmm.
And so just kind of in general, that number was already kind of jarring to me. It's like, we don't have that many people. The state is not very populated, but we're seeing, based on sadly those who are found deceased, there is this systemic factor at play that they are being found less often and sadly recovered deceased. And that's the forensic anthropology staff. We're the last responder. So it's not me thinking, oh, I keep seeing people of color. It's like, no, that's what's happening. People of color are ending up deceased, and we find them, in these either buried or discovered in these remote locations.
Yeah. Yeah. This is sometimes people ask me in my tech job, they're like, would you ever go back to biological anthropology? And I'm like, yeah, I would consider it. Like if I won the lotto, I would love to go back. If I didn't have to fight people for grants, like, yeah, that would be sick.
Yeah.
And then they're immediately like, they're like, so you would do like forensic stuff. And I'm like, I don't think I would. It's hard. It's really
Yeah.
emotionally hard because it's not like in historical bioarchaeology, which is what I mostly did, where everyone's dead and has been dead for a long time.
Yeah.
Like no one remembers them. It's a lot easier to be like, I'm learning a lot about the diet of people in colonial Virginia, when you're not looking at someone's like sister and being like, yeah, I'm sorry, I found your sister. She's dead. She has been for 30 years. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? On the other hand, one of the things that I also have heard people, like we're talking about the U.S. Mexico border. I don't know if you've listened to, I've been to a couple of talks by Kate Spradley,
Yeah.
at Texas
Yeah.
State. And like she talks about reuniting people with the remains of their loved ones and how powerful it is. So it's kind of, it's a very interesting, very sad coin.
And that's someone I when people ask me who are others in the field who you emulate and want to follow, and one of those is I mentioned Kate Spradley, the work she's doing with Operation ID in Texas, and really seeing there is an issue in Texas where they are not identifying these people, that there is a law in place that these people have to go have an autopsy, they have to go through the forensic system, but they end up just being buried on
Yeah.
the side of the road, not even in these paupers fields, but just off the side of a highway. And what Kate's doing and her team are doing is really giving those individuals closure for their families. That yes, they ended up here. Yes, they were trying to seek a better life, but they didn't survive the journey. But they still need their families need to know who they were and that they're okay.
Yeah. One of the things I talked about with Dr. Schultz earlier this year is I think that it's something that I hadn't really thought about because I, again, come from this historic background and it's like people have been dead for a long time, but like the grieving rituals people have around death and like the funerary and mortuary rites, they're very important to finding closure. And it's something that, because again, I just was like deep into the science of it, I'd never really thought about the live people and like what that would mean for them. But it is deeply important.
And I think that's that what you experienced, I think was what happened with the field of forensics. Everyone was so focused on the methods and meeting Daubert standards. So for those listeners, Daubert standard, it's a ruling that the methods you use are sound, that they are peer reviewed, that they are credible, that they have error rates and known measurements so they can be repeated. And so when we're so focused on the methods we use to do identification, we sometimes don't think about that stuff. We were anthropologists first. We were studying how humans live within a cultural environment. And so that was kind of the shift. The field had to focus on these methods, and they really started to not focus on the cultural aspects of why we did this in the first place.
Yeah. 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 It's a lot easier when, like, for example, one time we had a skeleton and it was like, we were 90% sure it was a pirate. And we're like, that is so sick. Like,
Yeah.
this could have been Blackbeard. Like, it's a very different vibe.
Yeah.
That was still a person too, though, you know, and it's,
Yeah.
you know, part of that is me growing up and getting older and thinking about this stuff more.
But also humor. Like
Yeah.
we since you deal with death, humor is a very common coping mechanism for not just for anthropologists, but law enforcement, all the people, medical people, anyone who's dealing with those kind of deep emotional things. Humor and dark humor especially is very common in those fields.
I have this story about a head in a bag that is so funny to anyone who's worked in forensics and is horrifying to literally everyone else.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that one off air.
Yeah.
But yes, totally. It's there. There are a lot of different coping mechanisms, and I that is something that like no one ever talked to me about in grad school or when I was in anthropology. Was like, how do you deal with the fact that you are like your entire job is working with deceased individuals?
Yeah.
Like how do you deal with that? And I don't. I don't know. I don't know if like anthropology has gotten better about talking about stuff like that or talking about things like that, but I hope so. I hope that we kind of make that move eventually. I think that it'll make it a lot easier to feel more human and to have more respect for the individuals that we work with. I have noticed a distinct shift in the field from when I was younger. Sorry, I shouldn't. I'm so sad that I'm getting old. From when I was younger to now, I feel like people in the field have become a lot more respectful about the individuals that they're working with, and they do think about them a lot more as individuals. But like, are we moving fast enough in that direction? I don't know. Are we? And then conversely, are we thinking about the anthropologists enough and like their mental health enough? I think people are starting to talk about it, but I think we've got a road ahead of us.
Yes, we do, and that's kind of yeah that shift from owner of these remains to custodian, like
Yeah,
that. Dr. Michael Blakely put that out. It's like we should be custodians of these remains. That they are. It's a privilege that we have them and are curators of them instead of this is my property and this is I have the right to collect the data from it.
yeah. There's been some interesting. Dr. Carlina Delikova was on the show like
Yeah.
a heap of years ago, and she talks a lot about understanding the history of the people who end up in collections and like how collections is kind of actually a gross way of thinking about it. You know,
Yeah.
it's super interesting.
Yeah, and that kind of that dovetails into what we're doing. That having an understanding of how these skeletons got here is the same thing we're trying to do now with our forensic approaches. Like, how do people end up dying? Why did they end up dead? Why are we here to uncover their remains or try to identify them? When in life there could have been some areas of mitigation or prevention.
Definitely, absolutely. I would like to be very respectful of your time, and we have been speaking for almost an hour, a little bit over an hour. So I would like to wrap up the interview with the same three questions I ask everyone. And the first question is, if someone wants to learn more about forensic anthropology and the kind of work you do, what's a good place for them to start?
Well, a place I recommend for people to go to is you can always check out Google my name, but more importantly, we have a co-edited special edition. It's called Contemporary Issues in Forensic Anthropology. It's a it's an online journal where a bunch of scholars are talking about contemporary issues and concerns in forensics. And so I definitely recommend you check out some of my colleagues who are looking at questions of transidentity, necropolitics, looking at the border crossing. How do we become more advocate and activists for forensic for these individuals that we're studying? Kind of what are the issues that at play? What are the barriers to keeping people of color out of anthropology? Why is anthropology not seen as a welcoming place for people of color? So definitely recommend people check out that special issue. And also feel free to check out our website, missingins.msstate.edu. So what we try to do is we're showcasing not only people are missing in the state of Mississippi, but all other resources for those who are looking for loved ones across the country. And if you do know someone who's missing in the state of Mississippi, please reach out and contact us. We'd be happy to showcase the case on our social media pages and also give them a shout out in terms of their website as well.
That's a lot of M's and S's. I will make sure to
Yeah.
have it spelled out in the show notes for people. Second question is, what are you reading for work right now?
So for work right now, it's kind of work and pleasure. There's a colleague of mine from Mississippi State. She's a sociologist. Her name is Dr. Maggie Hagerman. She just had a book come out that's entitled Children of a Troubled Time: Growing Up with Racism in Trump America. And so I've been really interested in kind of seeing what how our society as a whole, especially younger generations, dealing with ideas of racial identity, how our political officials are talking about these things, how DEI is influencing younger children. And so that's been kind of an interesting book that I've been looking at and reading and kind of finding out more from a sociology perspective that sociology is our academic sister, but there's still things that could be different nuances, approaches, perspectives that we don't have in our field. And then another one I've been looking at, it's called White Poverty, and understanding that when we talk about poverty, a lot of media, a lot of press talks about Black and Hispanic poverty, but really poverty is a systematic issue for all people. And so understanding that what are the powers that be that influence why people end up poor and remain poor, and kind of this nostalgic idea like, oh, if you work hard enough, you can become a CEO of a company, where that's not possible. It's not likely with some of these people in some of their situations. And so those are kind of two interesting things I've been reading about.
It's so okay. Two on each one of those. First, I had a German or an Austrian listener reach out to me named Alyssa, and or Elisa. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce that. And she was like, I didn't realize that in America, anthropology and sociology were like different departments. Like they're
Yeah.
two separate things. Like, and we had like a very interesting email conversation about like four field discipline versus like how people approach it in Europe. So if you are in Europe, it is very different here. And I definitely suggest that you look up, what's his name? Franz Boas, to understand why American anthropology looks the way it does and why it's so, and how it's so different than European anthropology. And then the other one is like, growing up in Charleston, West Virginia, I'm sure that you saw your fair share of poverty in Appalachia.
Yeah.
Like people,
Yes.
I was talking to someone at work the other day. I guess like something went viral on Reddit about like some guy who took a road trip in West Virginia, and he was like, this is the poorest region of the country. And the guy, my friend at work, was like, is that, he's from Romania. He's like, do people in America really live like that? I'm like, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, like people do not think about Appalachia at all outside of it. And it is distressing.
Yeah. And these are the people who, sadly, when you think of, oh, who's voting for so and so candidate or why that matters, a lot of these poor people don't vote because neither party is actually addressing their concerns. They're in poverty, no matter if it's a Democratic or Republican leader, they're still poor.
Yeah.
And so, kind of why we are just brushing it under the carpet there. It's like, oh, people are poor because of their own choices, not because of the same systematic barriers we talked about with race and gender identity that's affecting economic status as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I grew up in Virginia, so like Appalachia is like near and dear to my heart. It's a tough place. It's a tough place to be and to grow up. It's beautiful physically, like geographically,
Yeah.
beautiful, but
And they're hardworking people.
they're hardworking people.
It's sad to people like, oh, they're just not working hard enough. They're on drugs. They
work so hard. It's so hard to survive.
yeah.
Sorry, I could probably talk about this for a long time, but
Yeah.
once again, sad but important conversation. The theme of our discussion today. I hope
Yeah.
everyone enjoyed that. This total downer of an episode that we had so much fun taping. Third question is, what are you consuming for fun right now?
For fun, so my other full-time job is my 3-year-old and 1-year-old. So I think for fun, we're just watching a lot of Bluey right now.
Yes.
Bluey and Sesame Street are what I've been watching as of late.
I love that. I've heard a lot of recommendations for Bluey. All my friends are pregnant, so I'm like making like little notes for what I think their kids are gonna like in the future.
Well, the fun thing is I know more adults who watch Bluey who don't have kids. It's because I think with Bluey, it's showing how these parents, even though they're dogs, they're very engrossed in their kids' imaginative play. They actually go along with them on this kind of imaginary stuff. They really listen to what the kids want to do. And it's versus kind of when I was growing up, it's like, go play outside and come back in later. They're actually part of their play experience with these dogs. So I'm a little jealous of some dogs in Australia for some reason. I'm like, are they a better dad than I am? I don't know.
I actually saw like kind of like a hard-hitting piece of journalism about like some particular Bluey episode, and they were like, how did this get made? And it's like, what is happening?
Just touching people, I guess, in a different way.
I love that so much. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. Listeners, if you Dr. Goliath said that you could get in touch with him for if you know folks who are missing in Mississippi. Is it okay if they contact you for other stuff too?
Sure, please, yeah, feel free to contact me if you have questions about what we're doing or just, we talked a little bit about a bunch of things. So if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me.
Yeah, Dr. Goliath is super nice. I don't know if you got that vibe through this interview. I hope so, but you're really cool.
Thank you. No, you're really cool. I appreciate this is an awesome podcast, and I just appreciate being invited and getting to talk about things that are to me fun, important, cool, like impactful. Because why I do what I do now is because of the outreach it's gonna bring. Like I could just write articles and just be like, okay, I'm here to get published and get tenure, but no, it's what can I do to better my community and those who potentially look like me who want to be in the field. So
I thank you. Thank you so much. And you're doing that. Well, you have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining me for this episode of the Anthropology Podcast. If you have questions or comments, you can reach me at gabby.lapera@anthropology.com. That's spelled GABY.LAPERA@anthrobiology.com. This show is produced by me. Music courtesy of Chad Crouch, aka Poddington Bear at Sound of Picture.